Hey all my fellow and soon-to-be maniacs out there, this is the Chainsaw Maniac, your favorite webcomic maker and animator, here to help you with your webcomics. And today we're going to be discussing the call to action contest as I finished my first entry, and I'm pretty sure you guys want to know my thoughts on it and how it went, and this is just a way to kind of motivate and inspire you guys for your entries. Before we hop into this video, if you guys like this type of content and want to see more, I suggest you hit that subscribe button and like this video up, as well as ring that notification bell if you want to be notified of any other content I do. And feel free to share the video around if you feel like your friends would enjoy this video as well. There's a lot of different aspects to hop into for this contest entry, and I think the first thing I'm going to talk about is the background elements for the call to action contest. If you guys have noticed, and if you guys haven't seen the trailer yet for the entry, that's up on the channel as well. I did a cool trailer, I did some voiceover, some voice acting actually, and it came out pretty well. So if you guys want to check that out, it's out on the channel. And I'm currently working on my second entry, which is going to be based on my comic The Merchant of Ignitus. So if you guys love action fantasy, this is the perfect comic for you. I suggest you give it a read. So let's start off from the beginning, which was my planning process for this first entry. If you guys don't know, the way I plan my comics is I kind of use a storyboarding system because I'm a professional animator, and this is kind of how I understand stories. Gives me a better view of the composition of panels and how I would place them within a story in terms of the pacing and everything. I went with the storyboarding aspect of it because this is the thing I'm most comfortable with doing. As I was going along, the thing about this method is you can't really tell how much panels you're going to end up with at the end because you're just kind of going, and I ended up with almost 200 panels. So obviously I had to cut down on them, and it came up to like 100 and something panels. Even that was still too much, and so in terms of the panel length, I would recommend you guys keep it within 90 panels or just above 90 panels, like 95. That's fine. That's a good sweet spot right there I found for the comic, because in terms of pacing, if you would go over 90, it would drastically kind of affect the pacing of your episode as well. This is what I've noticed so far. And if you have over 100 panels, your comic's gonna be very cramped up, and there's not gonna be enough spacing for certain elements of your story if you kind of want to slow down certain aspects of it. Otherwise it's just going to be like bam bam bam, like just panels like running down from each other, and you don't want that. You would want that gutter space to kind of space out your panels a bit more, so you can tell your story a bit better in terms of its spacing. And you don't want things to be on top of each other because that's going to be weird, and they're going to kind of mark you down on pacing as well. So you gotta keep that in mind, guys. Also keep in mind, with your submission, you have a 100 page or 100 slice limit. You have a 128,000 pixel height limit within your entire episode. So you have to kind of be smart on how you kind of tell your story. So far with that, I had to take out certain panels that I feel like I wouldn't need, and I kind of let the text kind of do all the work instead of like just showing a bunch of panels. And I had to cut out certain story elements that I felt were unnecessary. So yeah, you got to keep this in mind. The fight is the most important thing within the story. Obviously you have to tell the story elements through your fight as well, and you just have to keep in mind the focal points of your story as well as the focal points of your characters. And this is where having too much characters can really mess up your entry, because I don't know what they call it, like character exhaustion. There's too much characters, telling every character story, and it's just gonna exhaust the audience. I would suggest keep it simple. 2 characters, that's all you need for this entry, and focus in on those 2 characters, their motives, what's driving them, the stakes that's at hand for these characters, what they're willing to lose to kind of get what they want. Keep those story elements in mind. Just hone in and focus in on these specific elements of your story. Do not worry about what background character 5 is thinking about. We don't need to know about that guy. Keep that guy out of your mind. No one wants to know about him. No one cares about him. He is a loser. Leave him alone. You know what I'm saying? If things get too complex, for example the background, this is why I kind of finished my entry as quick as I did. I went with a 3D background. Obviously the way I kind of do my 3D backgrounds, I make it very stylized, so it looks like I actually painted and drew the background thanks to Blender's grease pencil and like materials, and I'm pretty proficient with Blender. I can kind of get that out pretty quickly, so that kind of helped me out. I used my expertise as an animator and a 3D generalist to kind of finish those things up pretty quickly, and I'm pretty proud of myself for that. I did an entire city landscape, which is insane, and it was pretty fun to do actually. It wasn't actually that hard, and this is the thing you have to keep in mind with the backgrounds. The backgrounds also have to tell a little bit of the story, kind of go with the characters in the scene as well. You know, it's like it can't be like this very futuristic background and then you like they're wearing like, you know, all like Victorian type of clothing. Like it's not gonna meld well. You gotta make your characters like kind of meld well with the background. It's also part of the story. You gotta keep that in mind. And I know there's a lot of creators out there who don't like drawing backgrounds, but backgrounds are also quite important in terms of the action scenes because it helps place your characters within the scene, you know. And you don't want your audience to be confused. If the chair is on the left and for some reason you moved it to the right, and now your audience don't know where the hell your characters are, it looks like they did a full 180 for no reason, and this is kind of going to confuse your audience. So what I suggest is maybe if you don't want a 3D model or use 3D models for your background, at least draw up a top-down plan for your background so you know exactly where every element is. So when you're working on the episode, you keep that on the side of you, and you're like, okay, this is where this thing is, and you kind of, you know, keep that in mind as you're going with the action scene. There might be actually some grounds that's going to be broken, some windows that's going to be shattered, some walls that's going to explode, you know, because it's a fight scene, so it'll be a very intense fight scene. I don't know what you guys going for, but I'm going for DBZ, like crazy fight scenes, you know, like buildings crashing and stuff like that, because I wanted to show the audience the scale of the attacks and how intense these attacks are. And scale also plays a big part in certain moves. For example, there's the scene that I did where this guy's coming down with an axe kick on the other guy's head, and they're so far up into the sky, and like the city landscape looks so small in that corner, you know, of the panel, but at least you can tell, okay, where they are, how they got there. You can actually figure out the actual staging of the scene and where everything lies on this stage. Basically, you can actually tell the angle and the position of your characters within the set, and that's kind of gonna play into the very dynamic and like spinning actiony scenes, you know. So you got to keep that in mind, you know. It might help you as you move along. But moving forward, in terms of your characters, the dynamics between them, the most important part of this action fighting scene is obviously the characters. If they're just fighting nonsensically, this is kind of gonna impact the score that the judges are gonna give you, because you have to actually tell a story through the fight as well. There has to be a reason for the characters to be fighting. They can't just be fighting because someone stole someone's lollipop, even though that is a motive. It's just not a very high stakes motive. Maybe someone stepped in this guy's cornflakes and all of a sudden they start fighting. Like, what the hell, you know? It's not high stakes stuff, you know. But I mean, if someone stepped in my cornflakes, you know, I'd be pretty pissed as well. But all I'm saying is you gotta make your stakes as high as you could without making it too crazy, you know what I mean? Because when, you know, Webtoon is little babies over here, you know, there's limitations to the fight. It's not a lot of blood. There's not a lot of crazy stuff you can do. I mean, if you've seen the trailer, and I suggest you check it out again, there is a scene where the family dies and there's kids in this family, and I couldn't show the kids on scene, even though that would actually really impact the emotional aspects of the scene, because, you know, a child dying is like, goddamn, like this little kid just died, you know. I can't obviously show that on Webtoon because, you know, you can't be showing children dying. So I just showed, you know, grown-ups dying, which is, you know, a bit less intense. So although you can kind of imply that, you know, the kid is probably somewhere under the rubble, or he's been completely eviscerated from existence. I mean, it's pretty dark if you think about it in that way, but it adds impact to your fight. It adds impact to your characters' motives, they drive, and it actually does add a lot to the character when you're actually reading the comic that I put up. Because what I do is I kind of go back and read my comics, empty my mind, and I read it as an audience member. And I think that's the one thing I'm kind of grateful for in a way, is that I'm very forgetful of story elements within my story. So when I go back and read it, it's kind of like I'm looking at it with fresh eyes, and I can kind of make a very objective judgment on certain aspects of this comic. When I went back and read my entry, I kind of really enjoyed the story. Now, obviously, I would kind of enjoy it because I'm writing about stuff that I enjoy, so I would enjoy it. But story-wise, I felt like it was very congruent and made sense. There was no, you know, contradictory aspects of the fight. There's no contradictory aspects of the story. The drive was clear. The motive was clear. What Clover's character to fight this guy, and you can kind of figure out their background as well. Because if you actually read the comic, there's obviously no build up to his training, no nothing. You know, you don't know where he got the powers from. You don't know how he got as strong as he did. Although, if you look at his clothes, he's been training for quite some time. Somehow he acquired this power and has been perfected it to a certain way. And is a very rageful individual, a very vengeful individual, and he wants eye for eye. He kind of wants justice for not only his family, but he doesn't want this to happen to anyone ever again. He has a very strong drive. You can tell this character has a strong drive. So when you look at the superhero guy, you know, the very basic Superman like character, and what I was going with this character is kind of like he's kind of like this righteous person, so to say. Like he kind of is the symbol of hope, peace, and justice to the people. But he says something in the story when you get to it that kind of shatters this image of him and kind of builds this morally gray area of the heroes, how they would think and how their mentality would be. It kind of adds more to the story and adds more to the point of this guy, you know, going out, taking out all the superheroes, and it kind of gives you an ambiguity to where exactly good and evil stands, you know. And that's kind of what I'm going for with the series. It's like there's no like real or wrong or right. It's just what you think is right, what you think is wrong, what is correct, what is right to do, you know, these questions and stuff like that. This comic is actually, the concept for this comic is obviously based on The Boys. If you guys haven't seen that series, it's a cool superhero series, as well as like many other, you know, aspects of, if you've ever watched the Marvel movies, there was the Civil War movie where this kind of was touched on. A lot of DC comics do it as well, you know, this. And for once, the heroes are seen as like the evil people, or seen as people who can't really be trusted. There's something going on behind the scenes, and this is kind of what I was building on in terms of the story aspect of it. I got a lot of inspiration from other things that I've seen, and maybe, you know, you guys should actually check up some other things. Maybe you have an idea of what you want the comic to be about. I always suggest checking out the reference in terms of movies, series, and see how they go about doing it, and then kind of do it in your own way, you know. So yeah, there's a lot I've learned from the first entry, and so moving into my second entry, which is gonna be based on my current webcomic that is kind of on hiatus for quite some time, but I'm gonna be hopping back into it. I was gonna do Blade Reapers, but I feel like I'm hopping all over the place, and I need to actually stick my foot in like one hole and just, you know, kick that hole out first before I hop into another hole. So if you guys know what I mean, if that analogy made any sense. So over the last few weeks, I've been feeling like getting back onto the Merchant of Ignatius train. So I want to get back onto it. I want to punch out season 2 maybe. I'm currently putting together also my short story with Pray for Love. If you guys haven't seen it, it's up on Teleab. So links to that will also be down in the description down below. I've been working on a short story in the background in the meantime. It's not up on Webtoon yet. Once I finish up all the episodes, then I'll put it up on Webtoon. But for the Merchant of Ignatius, I think I'm going to start working on season 2 right now. And I think the best way to put that foot forward is to start it out in this contest. So the episode that I'm going to be working on for this contest is going to be a pre-season 2 episode, which is taking place before season 2. There's kind of like a time skip between season 1 and 2. This is in between that time skip. If you guys have read The Merchant of Ignatius, which I suggest if you haven't, you do, because it's in the description down below, and it's a really awesome action fantasy post-apocalyptic comic that you guys might enjoy. So if you have read it, you've known that the merchant you kind of ambiguous to whether or not the merchant is dead or not. And obviously, if you're watching me work on this entry, you can see the merchant is clearly alive. Okay, now how did he survive? What did he go through? Unfortunately, I can't talk about that as much in this episode. This episode's just going to be focused on the Dark Elves, basically. It's going to take place in the Dark Elf village. The merchant has been living there for quite some time now, a few years, obviously. If you guys haven't read the comic, the elves basically they're kind of like Nazis in this universe. They took over all the they just took over all the lands, and they believe they're the superior race, and they're in cahoots with the Demon King. One of the elf princes come through the land to kind of ask the people for their harvest or whatever they have to offer the kingdom. The clear, you know, trope of the people like, oh, we don't have enough, you know, we've given you the last time, you're asking for double this time, we don't have enough to provide you with what we need to provide you. And obviously the prince loses his shit and probably cuts off one of the guys' heads, but I can't put that up on your webtoon, so he probably just kicks a child or something, you know what I mean? So you know, that happens. And then the merchant steps out. It's like, why are you harming the people? Yada yada yada, and they're gonna start fighting, and this is where the fight happens. You're gonna get a good idea of how the magic system works. The merchant himself can't use magic, if you guys didn't know, so you get a good idea of what type of character he is, how he's gonna use certain tools and stuff to kind of combat this guy, and it's pretty cool, pretty interesting fight. I haven't fully fleshed out everything, if you can tell, you know, I've just like figured out, okay, this is how it's gonna kind of work. I have an idea, I'm gonna push that idea out. So I'm gonna do the thing that I did with the first entry, is kind of plan everything out, work on the background, and kind of flesh out the set first, where this action scene is going to take place. This gives me an idea of where certain things might happen within the scene. Maybe a mountain might break, maybe things may shatter, we don't know. I'll figure that out as I go along. Obviously it's going to be taking place in a dark elf village. Dark elves usually live in a dark forest like place, so there's going to be some forest elements there. They live in like some sort of hutting that I'm going to probably have to figure out. And it's going to be pretty interesting to kind of put these things together. I've already done the merchant character and the elf character, and I might actually design a few dark elf elders or a few dark elf characters. You know, the child that's going to be kicked in the face by that prince, you know, I got to design that guy. So that's just giving you guys an idea of what I'm working on, what's going on behind the scenes, and how I'm planning to work on this entry. If you guys want to see me work on this entry and you want to see me figure this things out, I stream every Saturday night, so if you guys want to hop on, I think it's Saturday night at 10 p.m. EST. You know, I don't know much about time zones, I only know a few time zones, but for South African time, that's 4 a.m. SAST. But obviously the stream times will be announced on Friday or Thursday on my channel, so you guys can actually see that. If you get me to 500 subscribers, you know, it would be easier to actually, you know, put these things out on the community tab, so hopefully we get there. Thank you guys for watching the video. Again, this is your second reminder to hit that like, subscribe, as well as that notification bell if you want to be notified of all the content I do, and share it with your friends. You know, maybe there's a friend who is struggling with the contest and needs some motivation and inspiration to get them moving. You know, send them this video and say, hey, this guy did a video, you know, maybe it will inspire you or motivate you to kind of work on your shit. So, you know, do that. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye now.